Hi, good morning. Welcome to Mark Your Way to the Factory of the Future. This is a webinar as part of our MECCO's virtual trade show, and I'm Scott Cunningham. I've been involved with marking and part traceability for more than 18 years now, and it's my pleasure to be here talking to you today. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. So as part of the Experience MECCO virtual trade show, you will be receiving an email tomorrow with details on some of our special limited time discounts and how you can redeem those within the certain time frame. If you have not already and you're interested in doing so, I highly recommend booking a one-on-one demo or information session with one of our sales engineers. You'll be able to ask any specific questions you have about your operations and get an understanding of where you're at and see if there's anything that MECCO may be able to do from our side to help you get to the where you want to be. And lastly, the only other thing was that there are 2 additional webinars that you could still register for later today. One is with Josh Chrysler, our application engineering manager. His is entitled Ask an Engineer, Your Toughest Laser Marking Dilemmas Explained. That's at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And then I will be presenting another webinar this afternoon at 2 o'clock titled Stand Out, the Latest Innovations to Gain That Competitive Advantage or Competitive Edge. So let's get started with Mark Your Way to the Factory of the Future. So just to kind of go over what we'll be talking about, what will be hopefully what you'll be learning in today's webinar, we're going to talk about what the factory of the future is and what that factory of the future looks like. We will talk about, and I'll ask you to think about how your particular company and your processes compare to other manufacturers in terms of adopting digital technologies and your progression along the path to this transformation of the factory of the future. A third area that we'll go into is some tips on how to achieve your goals to improve your operation. And then I'll go through a couple examples and success stories of companies we've worked with that have already made some significant progress in their digital transformations. So one of the really unique things about part marking is it really transcends all these industries. Everything from medical device manufacturing to firearms to automotive components, you name it. If something's being made, chances are there's a mark being made. And so that sort of ubiquitous technology allows us some advantages to be able to see a lot of different types of industries and to see trends across those industries. So I'm looking forward to kind of going more in depth with you guys today. All right, so when we talk about what is the factory of the future, it's really a convergence of information technology and operational technology. And so these worlds have been separate for a very long time. Manufacturing engineers working on the plant floor, making equipment run with PLCs and software, maybe some MES systems, and then on the IT side, the ERP systems, the systems that handle the company's data, and those worlds are now converging. With digital manufacturing, manufacturers can create a factory that is connected, networked, and fully integrated in terms of an environment. This enables them to use real-time data, analytics, and optimize the entire manufacturing process to realize productivity gains. So this is where you get that full visibility into what's going on anywhere within within your facility. And that's all enabled through the connectivity of equipment and machines and big data. So again, this is also known by other names. We talk about things like Industry 4.0, the digital transformation, smart factories, but really it's all this next wave of manufacturing getting really connected into full track and trace types of solutions. All right, so this is the exercise I talked about where I'm going to ask you to think about your factory, your manufacturing processes today, and think about where you're at in terms of scale of 1 to 10. I'm not going to ask you to give me that information, but just think about it in your mind, and then we'll revisit this later on as we can kind of show you a little bit more about what a 1 may look like or what a 10 may look like in terms of a real world example. So I'll give you just a second here to maybe think about where you're at in terms of 1 being you're just getting started, 10 being you're fully transformed, everything's in this digital space. All right, well, now let's see where other folks are in your industry. So this is a nice slide that's going to show how does your company stack up. So if you said that your company was, you know, a 9 or a 10 and that it was advanced in digital technology transformation, you're well ahead of the pack. Most companies are still at an earlier stage. So in fact, 49%, almost half of US manufacturers are using older or even manual devices or software. And this is all according to Deloitte. So often this information is older, not really helping them solve the root cause in a real-time situation. So systems that aren't connected to even be able to capture the right kind of data for that company, this is where, again, half the companies are operating today. So most of the time, the identification or traceability processes that they're implementing are really nothing more than complying with their customer demands. So it's really, we see this quite a bit where there's really no digital connectivity or traceability per se in the operation until the very final step, and that's when that customer-driven compliance mark is placed on the product. Again, now the benefit to their customer is that that customer will have some traceability coming into their facility, but for the manufacturer that's implementing that technology, there's really they're not getting any benefit. It's an added cost, and they're really just complying with their customers' demand. Only about 30% of Deloitte's respondents to the poll reported that they were actually thinking about the idea, but not planning to move forward. And then 19% said they weren't even thinking about digital factory transformation yet. So there's a lot of room yet in this space. All in all, most manufacturing companies are not taking full advantage of digital technology and all the ways that it can benefit their operations. So the good news is you still have a major opportunity to gain a competitive advantage if you're one of the you don't even have to, at this point, really be a first mover or an innovator, but if you're one of the early adopters, you can still carve out a competitive advantage, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So by not having gone through the digital transformation, lots of these manufacturers have the same problems, really regardless of the industry that they're operating in. When you know, we talk with them about things that are challenges that they faced, a lot of times they'll talk about mistakes in the manufacturing process. Parts that maybe skipped an operation or didn't get, tested, or maybe got mixed up or weren't mated properly in the end. Talk about defective materials shipped to customers. Again, maybe that's back to mistakes in the manufacturing process. Maybe they were good parts, but they were mislabeled and inadvertently, left-hand parts were shipped instead of right-hand parts. We talk about and hear about things like a lack of inventory control and a lack of visibility into what is there and where it's at. So some of those challenges we hear quite a bit of. Legal liabilities. If you find out that you have a problem in your manufacturing process and you have some general feel for how long that problem's maybe been going on without your knowledge, there's the potential to have to go out and recall product, and that can be a big legal liability for companies. If there are inefficiencies in the manufacturing process, if things do get messed up or do get mismarked, we've heard quite a bit of cases of late deliveries to their customers, scrambling around to sort of remake parts for an order. And then, lastly, probably the other big bucket we see is just overall limited manufacturing data. So, when you need the information, you now have to start collecting it, as opposed to being able to go back to a wealth of information that's already existing and just start parsing through that already existing data. So when you have to do a root cause analysis, or you have to try to understand what may be going on, it can be challenging without that information. And so now you may have to start collecting it with some sort of an ad hoc system. And again, that wastes a lot of time. So the average manufacturing company that we work with grapples with these types of challenges every day. So one thing that's important to keep in mind and to remember, and this is validated through the research, is that this transformation isn't like flicking on a light switch. It's really a journey to start somewhere and to make incremental improvements to get towards this vision or goal of being fully digitally transformed. So wherever your company is at along the road, the real key is to understand where you are, honestly assessing that, decide where ideally you want to be, what type of data is important to your operation today, and then really just start taking some steps to get there. So things like some examples of this might be things like starting to identify your product earlier in the process, and then maybe at a critical testing operation, implement a test a reader system to read that product in and record those test results at that station. You don't have to go full scale transformation overnight, and we can talk a little bit more about what those steps could be as we go through this webinar. But the key is to get started, and to get started soon if you really want to get ahead of the competition. So what does the future look like? What does that goal or end state look like? The small percentage of super early adopters, or the innovators or trailblazers, are now on the more mature side of their digital transformation. They, maybe they're obviously still on the journey that probably never ends, but they're they're very far along. And what that looks like for them is that digital transformation, it includes industrial data capture, synthesis with data sources for context, and a full management of product history. They can tell you or their customer or anyone who asks when the product was made, how it was made, what specifications it was made to, what testing criteria it went through, and every single step along the way in sequence. So having that type of granular data and then having the macro data is really valuable. The visualization rather environment with high productivity, optimized operations. One of the things we talk about is the democratization of tools and capabilities, lower costs, and a culture of continuous improvement driven by data. So the folks that work within these types of digitally transformed companies are empowered by the data that they have, and they are on an unending quest to continuously improve their processes, but again, with the support of all the information, hard data at their fingertips. So, and really the final point to make here is that these companies are setting their own course. They're driven by their own needs, their own unrelenting drive to improve, rather than driven by their customers' needs. And oftentimes, for the companies that are so driven by their customers' needs, it can be quite challenging to have to handle multiple customers' demands and adhere to or comply with all these different customers' requirements. What these companies that are in the future state find is that their own system enables them to provide any of the information and expose any of the information that their customers are demanding of them. They already have it. It's just different formats and slices and ways of presenting that information to their customer, rather than going out and trying to capture or record that information specific to one customer's demand or do something different for another customer. So hopefully that kind of makes sense as we go through here. So here's a nice little graphic to kind of explain the smart factory, and you know, have some visualization. So what is a smart factory and how does it work? Well, you have smart machines. So you have systems that can be linked up and provide data of you know what's going on within that system. So it's the use of smart machines, sensors, and tooling to give real-time feedback about the processes and manufacturing technology. So by uniting operations technology and informations technology, this digital transformation allows for greater visibility of factory processes, control, and optimization to improve performance. So data is being automatically collected at all the critical points in the manufacturing process via a barcode or some other type of machine readable ID. Maybe it's an RFID tag on a pallet. Maybe it's a direct part 2D data matrix code. Maybe, you know, but something on that part or on that pallet tells the system the identity of what is being handled. The machine tells the system what's being done, and then that data is compiled and stored for long-term traceability. So again, things like model number, batch number, the date, testing data, any of that stuff is all stuff that can be collected and provided. So let me just step back one slide here. So maybe you're currently identifying your products, or you're looking into implementing a system because of pressure from your customers, rather than a mindset of our customer wants A, B, and C identified on our product. So, that's what we have to do. I challenge you to ask yourself, what information do we need? What data will be valuable to our operation now and in the future? And that's where you make that transition from the compliance mindset to big data. That information that's immediate and meaningful. So whenever you want insights, or you want to understand what's really going on in your manufacturing process, that data is there for you to consume and to pull into any type of an analysis that you're looking to do. So it's the idea really of future proofing. So you want to know what's going on with production to solve manufacturing problems when they happen. And usually when you find out that they've happened, the problem already has occurred in the past. So oftentimes, by not having the data, now you have to start going in to collect the data, and you're weeks behind potentially, depending on how your volume and the type of process that you're running. So data talks, and if you don't have it, you obviously can't benefit from it. So when you're looking at doing things like root cause analysis and corrective actions and really getting in front of problems proactively, think about this as a bit of an insurance policy. You're future-proofing your operation so that if something does go wrong, you have all the data and all the tools in your hands to solve the problem almost immediately. So this next slide, we'll talk about digital transformation and how it works. So really, to put this in perspective, look at it this way. Digital transformation really hinges on better data management. So what does better data management look like? So the industrial Internet of Things, this IIoT ecosystem, really relies on collecting massive volumes of data from multiple sources. And that's the first step. Then after you've collected this data, obviously you want to store it, and really normalizing that data so that you get a sort of an average view of what things typically look like. Distributing and sharing that information, and then lastly, really getting to where you can visualize your whole manufacturing process, get ahead of things proactively, and doing real-time analysis of what's going on and where you should focus. So all of that data management begins with traceability, and that's why this is so core and important to MECCO and what we do. That data management you need right now to increase your competitiveness and create the factory of the future begins with one thing: traceability. So it starts small with an infrastructure that can expand incrementally as you decide to grow your track and trace capabilities. So when I'm working with manufacturing customers, I found that they're more successful when they take a bottom-up approach to implementing traceability. So the process typically begins at the lean cell level and then scales up. As they expand their system, maybe they're adding laser or pin marking systems to other operation, other areas. Maybe they're doing multi-part identification where they have like an in-process mark and then later put a finished mark on the product after it's gone through some processes. But they're they're starting somewhere at maybe marking the product, and then as they go through, there's different ways of tying the data together. Maybe they're integrating a database. Maybe they're telling the marking system what that product's identification is. Maybe they're letting the marking system dictate the product identification, and they're using that to basically create the entity in their database. But there's different ways to do this. And again, I would encourage you to think about starting simple and starting with just some of these basics in mind. So again, we talked about it before, becoming a smart factory is not like switching on the lights. So really, again, the first step, start identifying your products, identifying them uniquely, right? If you make 500 widgets a day, we challenge you that every single one of those widgets is not exactly the same. So don't treat them as such, right? Give each of those 500 widgets their own identification. That will enable you to, do things like counting extremely easily. That will allow you to track that product in places where you want visibility, or there's something of value or some type of meaningful information. You want to bring more and more of that information forward. So really trying to build a foundation for just starting with marking, identifying your product, and then starting to collect in the most important areas. So leaders in this space, innovators, are doing this, but the majority of manufacturers are still not quite there yet. So again, if you want to capitalize on the competitive advantage and be early in this, there's a road to building this foundation, and it's pretty simple. So again, step one, determine what identifying information should be marked on the part. The only real rule to this is making sure it's a unique identification. Aside from that, there's no right or wrong answer after that. Just make sure it's unique. Selecting the best marking equipment for the product environment and the product life cycle. So things that are going to survive your manufacturing processes. Think about things that will survive your the use conditions in the field. And again, don't limit yourself to one mark forever, right? If you need some kind of in-process identification, and then you need some sort of final mark for your customer, that's certainly been done many times before. So step three, integrate the vision technology to verify the accuracy and grade the quality of your marks. So if you're going to put a machine readable barcode or data matrix or RFID tag on your product, you want to make sure you're going to be able to easily read that information in further on downstream. And that's where that scalability comes in. You're going to scale that operation so that you're, maybe you start out reading it in one location, like a, critical test function, but maybe you've got ambition to read it at packing and inventory and all sorts of other locations where you can scan it in and scan it out. So you want to make sure that your mark, your identification is easily recordable and accessible in the future. And then lastly, and this is probably one of the biggest question marks, is the data side of things. How are you going to enable that industrial data and the analytics that really to happen. And it's by, integrating that marking equipment with, maybe your enterprise software. So when we talked about what marking information should go on there, if you already have the IT infrastructure and you already have the framework for this, allowing your ERP system to tell your marking system, this is what this product should be called, or this is what I want to identify it as. That's a great way to now get information technology and operational technology sort of coupled up together. And so then that same identification can go through your operational technology on the floor, and you really marry those systems at that critical juncture. All right, so traceability and serialization. So what I was talking about before, where I said, a lot of companies are complying with their customers' requirements for marking and traceability, and that's because their customer may be receiving components and compiling those components into an assembly. So here you can really see how that process plays out through the value chain. So the serialization keeps a unique ID, a unique identification number. That's eternally tied to the part, at the component level, and stored to a secure database. Then that product's tracked through the manufacturing process, and then that gives a complete history of that component product from cradle to grave. That starts your genealogy of your part, and that genealogy can then be made part of the subassembly or the major assembly and the final assembly. So when you think of, automotive is an easy example to show, but you think of components that go into an engine, that go into an engine block or a transmission, and then get put into a vehicle. That VIN number on that vehicle can track all the way back to the component level. So if there is a recall situation at the component level, and you can, go out and try to find 100 of the components that were potentially suspect, that you can track and find the 100 VINs that may be impacted by those 100 components. So by having that genealogy really gives you the ability to do real-time tracking to the enterprise, and again, helps with this sort of containment and airproofing. So I shared with you a slide about the problems that a lot of manufacturers face, and it's interesting in a lot of those cases. Implementing some sort of a track and trace solution solves a lot of the same problems. And so when you look at those problems initially, they seem to be all over the place, and they're challenges for different departments. But when you implement a track and trace solution, the data from market and in Rockwell Automation says that companies are reporting streamlined implementation via smart integration, improved production efficiency, quantified as 4 to 5% per year, better marking accuracy, faster time to market. They're getting products out quicker, up to 50% reduction in lead time. They talk about airproofing and quality, 50% reduction in parts per million, better containment and inventory control, reducing the amount of inventory they have to have on hand because they have better visibility into what they already have. An improved ability to conform part authenticity. So really, when you're challenged by your customers to make good on a warranty claim, we've heard from manufacturers that sometimes they get their competitors' products back and have to make those right because they can't differentiate their product from their competitors' products. So confirming the authenticity of the product, and then lastly, just enhancing the supply chain management overall. visibility of the entire supply chain. So a quick case study of aluminum die-cast manufacturer we've worked with, and you know, they in die-cast, you know, it's a pretty rough environment. You know, it's a lot of heat, and you may not think of a die-cast operation as really being a you know, a smart factory or a factory of the future. But you know, in this particular case, this manufacturer has implemented a full traceability from, you know, coming right out of the casting and through every single manufacturing process that their product goes through. So, you know, the step one is to mark your product and identify it uniquely, and then track that product through. What that does for them is it guarantees that each operation has been completed and in sequence, and that each test along the way has been passed. So there's no potential of skipping an operation or skipping a testing gate. One of the other interesting things is, you know, oftentimes if you do have some fallout or some scrap on your line and you're not uniquely identifying your product, you may put things back for rework. Well, how many times does the same failed product go through rework? Well, if you're not uniquely identifying it, you're not keeping track of it, you may not have any idea that there's a limit to the number of times you can rework that part. And maybe it's 2 or 3, but beyond that, you're never going to recover that product. And so you may be wasting valuable manufacturing operations on the same scrapped part over and over again, because you don't have enough visibility to know that this product has already been run through 6 times, or, you know, 3 times, and you're not going to be successful. So the real takeaway here is that this data, if you're not collecting it, you don't know the value that it can have. But the companies that are collecting it are finding all sorts of interesting uses for it, quantifiable value in it, and it really allows you to take control of your operation rather than having your customers tell you how they want you to expose certain things in your process for their traceability solutions. So now that we've had a chance to kind of go through what a 10 is, what a 1 is, I'm going to ask you to, you know, take another shot at identifying where you're at, what stage your company is on the scale of 1 to 10, and, you know, see, it would be interesting to see if that's changed at all. So, you know, how prepared would you say your company is to compete in 2021 and beyond with regard to digital technology and advanced manufacturing? So no matter what point you're at right now, whether you're a 1 or a 5 or an 8, maybe you're a 10, but wherever you are, the first thing you need to understand is what the right solution is for your company. And so we help companies go through that process with our expertise and our experience. We've got a lot of experts at MECCO that can help navigate through this. So during a one-on-one assessment, we typically start by asking about, you know, things like your material, your application, vision of you know, material handling, you know, things like that. And we really try to get to the bottom of what your issue is, what's causing it, and, you know, how we can potentially help create a solution with you that will, you know, not only solve the problem today, but will enable you to solve problems of tomorrow ahead of time. And again, just different examples. Again, this afternoon at 1 o'clock, one of our application engineers is going through a more in-depth, discussion on marking technologies and interactions with material. But these different marking technologies are potentially apt in different ways. So, laser direct part marking can be a fantastic finish mark. It can be a fantastic in-process mark. Maybe not the right solution for when you get to the container level, right? Labels at the box level obviously make sense. Pin marking can be great if you're going through, paint processes or sandblast processes. Something that's going to be maybe more in process, or maybe it's something that's going to go to your customer and give them that cradle to grave traceability that they need. But we really try to work, with our customers to determine, what the goal is, what the most appropriate technology is for where they're at in the operation. So again, just a quick slide to kind of bring it down to maybe a little bit more concrete example of how we would get started. So in summary, really, there's 3 things I can leave you with in this webinar. They're as follows. Digital transformation is a marathon, not a sprint. This is not something that you just set out to do and you go do it. It would, think of the analogy of like running an Ironman. The first step may be to run a 5K or to, just take a walk around the neighborhood, right? It's to get to the pinnacle of this is going to take time. And so preparing yourself, preparing your team, preparing your management, that this is not a light switch. This is something you're going to invest in, and you're going to continue on that journey. The second takeaway is that this all starts in a very, very simple place, and that is identifying your product uniquely, identifying the difference between, back to those 500 widgets that you're making in a day, the difference between widget number 1 that you make and widget number 2 and number 500. That is a critical component in any of these sorts of solutions. And then lastly, start small. Start with capturing the data that's important to you today. You can grow into a solution or a bigger type of system where you read it at every single point in the process, but just start with things that you think would be helpful to have that type of data at your disposal, and shift it from, I've got a problem I have to solve, now I'm going to have to go collect the data, shifting that mindset from, there's likely to be a problem in the future. If I start collecting the data now, when that problem surfaces in the future, I'll have the tools to solve that problem immediately, or maybe even ideally before it even occurs. So those are the takeaways. I want to thank you for your participation today. Again, just a few reminders: you can still register for the 2 other webinars today. Don't forget that we have some exclusive deals for you as being part of this virtual trade show that we're doing, and we'll send that promo code after the presentation. We're available for one-on-one demonstrations of the laser and dot beam technologies, and also just to talk about where you're at and what your specific needs are. So at this point, I'm going to open up for questions and see where we get started. So if you have any questions that you want to put into the question box, just type them in, and I'll be happy to answer them. Let's see if we have any here. Oh, okay. Here's one on how is COVID affecting data adoption, or how products are marked? So that's a really good question. COVID, is having an impact on, from what I can see in the way we operate. And so it's become probably more critical. One of the trends that I'm seeing is that, you're needing to do more processes with maybe better social distancing and fewer operators, which means that, you're having single operators being responsible for more parts of a manufacturing process. So, maybe before, in an assembly line mindset, you'd have, each operator involved with their own specific operation and task. Now I'm seeing more and more, companies transition in sort of like an in-cell process where maybe there's 5 or 6 operations that product has to go through. And so by implementing part marking and traceability solutions into that, you can actually airproof and make sure that those operators, are enabled and empowered to catch mistakes before they happen, right? So if you've got 5 operations and they have to go in series, if your operator is managing a lot of different products and maybe has the potential to mix up a part from one machine and skip a machine altogether accidentally, this type of unique identification and putting these system checks in place really prevent that from happening and enable your operators to be able to operate more at ease, and they're not afraid of making a mistake, because there's a system there to protect against that. So, as an example, if you had a unique identification on the product and you had maybe a database saying it went through operation 10, it goes through operation 20. If for some reason the operator, we're taking that product from 20 to operation 40 and skipping operation 30, there are ways to build in that your system would flag that and go, hey, wait, stop. This product has only been through op 10 and op 20. It needs to go back to op 30 before it can come here. Things like that, I think I'm seeing more and more of that in industry, and I think that will continue to be more and more important as we go forward with, again, fewer operators doing more processes. So good question. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions. So at this point, again, thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Take care.